The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham.
In 1919, I happened to be in Chicago on my way to the Far East. Hello? Hello?
Mr. Maugham?
Yes?
I have a call for you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm connecting you now.
Elliot Templeton here.
Elliot? I thought you were in Paris.
No, I'm visiting with my sister. We want you to come along and have lunch with us today.
I should love to.
Congratulations on the success of your novel. I see it on all my friends' tables.
I'm very pleased to hear that, Elliot. I'd known Elliot Templeton for 15 years. Elliot Templeton was a good friend to me. He was also a snob. He was in his late 50s now, a tall, elegant man with a distinguished appearance. He had an apartment in Paris, on the Rive Gauche, in the fashionable Rue Saint-Guillaume. People who did not like him said he was a dealer. He would have denied the charge indignantly, but there were many old families in France, and some in England, whose circumstances compelled them to part with an heirloom, if it could be done quietly. And they were glad to know a man of great culture and perfect manners who could arrange the matter with discretion.
So now we have you in Chicago, Mr. Maugham.
Indeed.
My brother tells me that you came over by the southern route.
Yes.
Did you stop in Rome?
I spent a week there.
And how is dear Queen Margherita?
I'm afraid I can't tell you, Mrs. Bradley.
Oh, didn't you go and see her? She was so kind to us when we were in Rome. Mr. Bradley was first secretary there.
To tell you the truth, authors don't hobnob with kings and queens as a general rule.
But she's such a sweet woman. I'm sure you'd like her.
Louisa Bradley was a widow, a life in the diplomatic service. 2 sons, elsewhere, out of my story, and a daughter, very much in it.
Are we late?
Isabel!
I brought Larry back.
Hello, Mrs. Bradley.
Is there anything for him to eat?
I expect so. Ring the bell and tell Eugene to put another place.
I've already told him.
This is my daughter, Isabel. And this is Lawrence Darrell.
Isabel will always be for me what she was then, sparkling and vivacious. She was so natural that she made Elliot, for all his elegance, look rather tawdry. Her freshness made her mother, Mrs. Bradley, with her pasty, lined face, look tired and old. At lunch, they were discussing how to refurbish the dining room. Elliot had brought Gregory Brabazon, the decorator, to join us.
Louis can.
Oh, refectory table.
I see, Chippendale. More in keeping with Mrs. Bradley's personality. I always think that's so important. Mr. Templeton, do you know the Duchess of Oliphant?
Mary? She's one of my most intimate friends.
She wanted me to do her dining room, and the moment I saw her, I said George II.
How right you were. I noticed the room the last
Larry
time I
was
dined.
saying nothing.
It's in perfect.
He looked very young. He was
One has
tall,
an instinct for
thin,
having something
and
like
loose-limbed,
well done. How
pleasant-looking,
one feels.
neither handsome
That is
nor
the Duchess
plain,
of Oliphant's great talent,
shy,
to put one
in no way remarkable.
it is a gift.
He seemed quite at ease, however.
It's a sign of the best.
He crossed his long, fine hands.
Don't have her-
Isabel's eyes kept returning to him. They were filled with love and affection.
You mustn't try to rush me. I want to have time to think it over. What do you think of it all, Larry?
I don't think it matters one way or the other.
You beast, Larry. I particularly told you to back us up.
If your mother is happy with what she's got, what's the object of changing?
An interesting perspective.
And don't grin like that, Larry, just because
Yes,
you're very stupid.
unless I was mistaken, Isabel was madly in love with the boy. But there was also something maternal in her feelings, wasn't there? It was unexpected in one so young.
Don't pay any attention to him, gentlemen. He's very stupid and entirely uneducated. He doesn't know anything about anything, except flying.
Flying?
He was an aviator in the war.
I should have thought he was too young to have been in the war.
He was, much too young. He behaved very badly. He ran away from school and went to Canada.
Isabel.
By lying his head off, he got them to believe he was 18 and got into the Air Corps. He was fighting in France at the time of the armistice.
You're boring your mother's guests, Isabel.
Oh, you should have seen how lovely he looked in his uniform.
Isabel.
And such a zest for life. Larry!
Oh,
Oh! Oh!
Larry!
It's great!
Your nice suit! Your shirt!
Oh, I told you I wanted to cool off. Try it!
Wearing this? Don't be ridiculous.
Oh, the sun will dry your clothes.
I can't row this thing. What do I do?
Join me!
Larry! Tell me what to do. I'm going round in circles. Wait. Oh, I'm going to lose this oar.
You said you were too hot.
Oh, Larry!
You can swim.
I know I can swim.
You got a silver cup for swimming.
Not in my clothes. Oh, you're impossible.
But irresistible. Race you.
What?
I'll race you to the shore.
All right, then.
Hey, slow down.
Catch me. Catch me.
It's rather charming to see two young things so much in love with one another.
She's 19, and he is only just 20. He hasn't got a job. He has a tiny income. And my sister's not a rich woman by any manner of means. She needs all she has.
Well, he can get a job.
That's just it. He's not trying. He seems to be quite satisfied to do nothing.
I dare say he had a pretty rough time in the war. He may want to rest.
He's been resting for a year. That's surely long enough.
Who else is in the cast? I know only her Christian name, Sophie. I'm placed beside her at Mrs. Bradley's dinner table. Sophie is a shy, drab girl, to all appearances. Very thin, watchful, forcing her laughter, making an effort to be a good sort.
That. Oh, that's Gray Maturin. His father's got an enormous house. He's our millionaire. We're very proud of him. He's one of the richest men in Chicago. Gray is his only son.
The boy's a fine-looking fellow.
He's nice. You'd never think his grandfather was shanty Irish, and his grandmother a Swedish waitress in an eating house. I know several girls who'd stop at nothing short of murder to get him, but they haven't got a chance.
Why not?
You don't know anything, do you?
How should I, Sophie?
Gray is so much in love with Isabel he can't see straight, and Isabel is in love with Larry.
What's to prevent Gray from setting to and cutting Larry out?
Larry's his best friend.
Oh, I suppose that complicates matters.
If you're as high-principled as Gray is.
I had a feeling this Sophie had humour and shrewdness, but kept them disguised. She was also unsure of herself. I liked her modesty, her unobtrusiveness. She left with the other young ones. The conversation at the table then turned to Isabel and Larry. They were engaged. Mrs. Bradley was fond of him and thought he would make Isabel happy.
Her character's stronger than his. She can give him just what he lacks. I know they're young, but I'm willing for them to get married at once. Only I can't allow it until Larry has gone to work.
He's dawdled around long enough.
A man has to work. He's perfectly strong and well now, isn't he?
Mr. Maugham is very discreet, Louisa.
I should hope so.
I saw him observing Gray.
Go ahead. Tell him.
All the time Larry was away, Gray was very attentive. Isabel likes him, and if the war had lasted much longer, she might very well have married him. He proposed to her.
I see.
She didn't accept, and she didn't refuse.
When Larry first came back, we tried to get him to tell us some of his adventures. He just laughed in that way of his and said there was nothing to tell. He hasn't even told Isabel. She's tried and tried, but she hasn't got a thing out of him.
My opinion is that Larry will never amount to very much. No money and no standing. Gray Maturin is a very different proposition. He has a good old Irish name. There's been a bishop in the family.
You've been away from America for so long, Elliot, you've forgotten that in this country girls don't marry because their mothers and uncles are in favor of it.
I was staying at a club in Chicago which had a good library. Next morning, early, I looked in. There was only one other person there, seated in a big leather chair, absorbed in a book. It was Larry. The title of the book was Principles of Psychology. Why are you reading William James?
I'm very ignorant.
You're also very young.
When I came back from the war, they all wanted me to go to college. I couldn't. After what I'd been through in 2 years, I felt I couldn't go back to school. I felt I couldn't enter into a freshman's life.
No?
I didn't want to act a part I didn't feel, and I didn't think the instructors would teach me the sort of things I wanted to know.
When I left the library, Larry was still absorbed in his reading. I was passing the library in the evening, and the oddest thing, Larry continued to sit in the same chair, intent on the very same book. And just as odd, it seemed to me, when I was with Elliot and the Maturins, father and son, for lunch by the lake next day.
You know Larry, don't you, Mr. Maugham?
Yes, I do.
Gray persuaded me to take him into my business. They're great friends. Gray thinks the world of him.
What did he say, Dad?
He thanked me. He said he realized it was a great chance for a young fellow, and he thought it over very carefully and come to the conclusion he'd have been a disappointment to me and thought it better to refuse.
That's very foolish of him.
It is, Elliot.
I'm awfully sorry, Dad. It would have been grand if we could have worked together.
You can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink.
But Louisa Bradley was more succinct and more unanswerable.
If he loves you, Isabel, I said, he ought to be prepared to work for you.
She sent the young pair on a picnic for Isabel to talk some sense into him. No luck, Elliot told me.
Isabel's been crying. Larry's going to Paris. He's going to be away for 2 years. She's promised to wait for him.
What's he going to do in Paris all that time?
Please, Elliot, I've just had this conversation with Isabel. He says he's going to loaf.
What on earth do you mean?
That's what he said.
If I might inquire, sister dear, what's to happen at the end of 2 years?
I tell you, I don't know, Elliot.
Don't you think it's very unsatisfactory?
Very.
There's only one thing to be said, and that is that they are both very young. It won't hurt them to wait 2 years, and in that time, a lot may happen.
Why are you smiling, Elliot?
I understand that he got a glimpse of Paris during the war, and I can't blame him if he was captivated by the only city in the world fit for a civilized man to live in. He's young, and I have no doubt he wants to sow his wild oats before he settles down to married life. Very natural and very proper. I'll keep an eye on our Mr. Darrell. I'll introduce him to the right people. He has nice manners, and with a hint or two from me, he'll be quite presentable.
A couple of days later, I'd gone to say goodbye to Mrs. Bradley and Elliot, and to thank them. Isabel waylaid me on my way out.
I'll walk with you as far as the drugstore. I've just remembered there's something I want to get.
Ice cream sodas?
Yes, please.
2 sodas it is.
Another Chicago experience for you.
Yes.
Tell me, Mr. Maugham, what do you think of Larry?
I've only seen him 3 times. He seems a very nice boy.
Is that all?
There's something modest and friendly and gentle in him that is very appealing.
You know, I have no one to talk this over with. Mama can only see things from her own point of view. She wants my future to be assured.
That's natural, isn't it?
And Uncle Elliot only looks at it from the social side. My own friends, those of my generation, I mean, they think Larry's a washout. It hurts terribly.
Of course.
I do love him, but he won't say what he means to do.
No.
He won't sell bonds or go into a law office or study medicine. A man must work, I told him, for the sake of his self-respect. When we were talking, he said something very odd to me.
The dead look so terribly dead when they're dead.
What do you mean exactly?
Just that. You have a lot of time to think when you're up in the air by yourself. You get odd ideas.
What sort of ideas?
vague, incoherent, confused. A lot happened to me then, you know.
Such as?
Oh, just the ordinary casual run of events. My greatest friend in the Air Corps was killed, saving my life. I didn't find that easy to get over.
Tell me, Larry.
I'd rather not talk about it. I'm sorry, darling.
I'm sorry, Mr. Maugham.
Sodas, folks. For the lady.
Thanks.
Sir,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Why don't you marry him right away? And go off to Paris with him.
There's nothing I'd like to do more. But I couldn't. And, you know, though I hate to say it, I do really think he's better off without me. If Mama's medical friend is right and he's suffering from delayed shock, surely new surroundings and new interests will cure him. And when he's got his balance again, he'll come back to Chicago and go into business like everybody else. I wouldn't want to marry an idler.
How is it?
It's good. Try yours. Larry makes me think sometimes he's a sleepwalker who is suddenly wakened in a strange place and can't think where he is. He was so normal before the war. He was so scatterbrained and gay. It was wonderful to be with him. He was so sweet and ridiculous. What can have happened to change him so much?
When I got to Paris myself, I was fatally amused at Eliot's exasperation with him.
I did have a kind of sneaking sympathy for the boy. I couldn't blame him for wanting to spend a couple of years in Paris, and I was prepared to launch him. But I couldn't believe that any young fellow in his senses could come to Paris without evening clothes.
I found Larry at the Dome. He was sitting by himself at a little marble-top table on the crowded terrace, idly watching the people strolling past. I asked him how he liked Paris.
I like it very much.
Do you live in Montparnasse?
Yes.
Eliot was rather put out that the only address you gave was the American Express. What do you do with yourself all the time?
I loaf.
And you read?
Yes, I read.
Do you ever hear from Isabel?
Sometimes. We're neither of us great letter writers. She's having a grand time in Chicago. They're coming over next year to stay with Eliot.
That'd be nice for you.
I don't believe Isabel's ever been to Paris. It'll be fun taking her around.
Now, I answered all your questions about my China trip. Tell me about yourself. No good. It had been a very pleasant occasion, responding to his curiosity about me, but clearly he wasn't meaning to be communicative about himself.
Well, I must be off.
We parted. I knew no more of what he was up to than before. Next spring, sooner than planned, Mrs. Bradley and Isabel were in Paris to stay with Eliot.
Don't be tiresome the moment you arrive, Louisa. No one can be well turned out without a maid, and I've engaged Antoinette not only for your own sake and Isabel's, but for mine. It would mortify me that you shouldn't be perfectly dressed. Of course, you want to buy some new frocks.
I don't want to spend a lot of money, Elliot.
I know. I'm proposing to pay for everything myself. I've talked to Chanel, and I've made an appointment for you both tomorrow at 3.
There's Larry. I'll go get him. Oh, Larry!
Am I to understand that Isabel and Larry are still engaged?
So far as I know.
It's a worry for you when your health isn't what it should be.
If I attend to my diet and take moderate doses of insulin, there's no reason why, even with an incurable disease, I shouldn't live for a good many years.
Deo Valente?
But I am anxious to see Isabel settled. I'm thinking of asking Larry to accompany us to the Tyrol and maybe Italy.
Why so?
So that Isabel can tell what his feelings for her are. Henry Maturin was sore with Larry for turning down the position he offered him, but Gray has talked him round, and he can go into the business the moment he comes back to Chicago.
Gray's a very nice fellow.
He certainly is. Oh, I know he'd make Isabel happy.
Now, I've arranged some parties for you. Luncheon tomorrow and a grand dinner party at the end of the week.
You'll ask Larry, won't you?
He tells me he hasn't any evening clothes.
Well, ask him all the same. After all, he is a nice boy, and it wouldn't help to give him the cold shoulder. It would only make Isabel obstinate.
You sit in the armchair. It's not very comfortable, but it's the best I can offer.
Is this where you live?
It is. I've been here ever since I came to Paris.
But why?
It's convenient. It's near the Bibliothèque Nationale in the Sorbonne. It's got a bathroom.
It's awfully sordid.
Oh, no, it's all right. It's all I want.
What's that great big book?
Which?
On the table.
Oh, that's my Greek dictionary.
Your what?
It's all right. It won't bite you.
Are you learning Greek?
Yeah.
Why?
I thought I'd like to. I can read Latin now almost as easy as French.
When are you coming back to Chicago?
Chicago? I don't know. I haven't thought of it.
You said that if you hadn't got what you wanted after 2 years, you'd give it up as a bad job.
I couldn't go back now. I'm on the threshold. I see vast lands of the spirit stretching out before me, beckoning, and I'm eager to travel them.
What do you expect to find in them?
The answers to my questions. I want to make up my mind whether God is or is not. I want to find out why evil exists. I want to know whether I have an immortal soul or whether when I die it's the end.
But, Larry, people have been asking those questions for thousands of years. If they could be answered, surely they'd have been answered by now. Don't laugh as if I'd said something idiotic.
On the contrary, I think you've said something shrewd. But on the other hand, you might say that if men have been asking the questions for thousands of years, it proves they can't help asking them and have to go on asking them.
Have to?
Besides, it's not true that no one has found the answers. There are more answers than questions, and lots of people have found answers that were perfectly satisfactory for them.
How long do you think all this is going to take you?
I wouldn't know. 5 years, 10 years.
And after that? What are you going to do with all this wisdom?
If ever I acquire wisdom, I suppose I shall be wise enough to know what to do with it.
What about me? Am I of no importance to you at all?
You're of very great importance. I want you to marry me.
When? In 10 years?
No, now. As soon as possible.
On what? Mama can't afford to give me anything.
I've got a bit saved up. Don't you remember how we used to talk about traveling the world together?
Oh, of course I want to travel, but not like that. I don't want to travel second class on steamships and put up at third-rate hotels without a bathroom and eat at cheap restaurants.
I went through Italy last October like that. I had a wonderful time.
I want to have babies, Larry.
Well, that's all right. We'll take them along with us.
You're so silly. Do you know what it costs to have a baby? Do we really want to live in a sordid, beastly way all our lives with nothing to look forward to? It means that I should be a drudge to the day of my death. And for what?
For what?
So that you can spend years trying to find answers to questions you say yourself are insoluble? It's so wrong. A man ought to work. That's what he's here for. That's how he contributes to the welfare of the community.
Do you think that by getting my friends to buy the securities that Henry Maturin is interested in, I should add greatly to the welfare of the community?
There have to be brokers, and it's a perfectly decent and honorable way of making a living.
You'd love life in Paris.
This life?
One can get by very nicely without going to Chanel.
I've lived in Chicago ever since I can remember. All my friends are there. It's where I belong, and it's where you belong. Mama's ill, although she doesn't talk about it, and she's never going to get any better. I couldn't leave her, even if I wanted to.
Does that mean that unless I'm prepared to come back to Chicago, you don't want to marry me?
Yes, Larry, that's just what it does mean. If you won't listen to reason, there's nothing more to be said.
But I don't think it is reason. I think you've been talking the most terrible nonsense all the time.
I have? My poor Larry, you're as crazy as a coot. If you loved me, you wouldn't make me so unhappy.
I do love you. Unfortunately, sometimes one can't do what one thinks is right without making someone else unhappy.
Here you are, Larry.
What?
Here's my ring.
It's no good to me. Won't you keep it as a memento of our friendship? You can wear it on your little finger. Our friendship needn't stop, need it?
I shall always care for you, Larry.
Then keep it. I should like you to.
It's too large for my right hand, see?
Well, you can have it all then. I know.
What?
Let's go out and have a drink. Somewhere nice.
All right. That doorman we passed on the way in here. He's never going to think I'm leaving these premises a virgin.
The Ritz Bar, yes?
Yes, don't forget you're lunching with us tomorrow.
You bet your life I won't.
Come on, to the Ritz.
It was in London that we met again.
Do you remember, Mr. Maugham, that evening we went to a drugstore and had an ice cream soda?
Perfectly.
You were very nice and helpful then. Will you be nice and helpful again?
I'll do my best. No ice cream sodas at Claridge's, though. Let's go down and have tea. Are you unhappy, Isabel?
No, not exactly unhappy. When Larry isn't there, I'm all right. It's when I'm with him that I feel so weak. I hate the idea of Larry making such a mess of his life with his learning, his dead languages.
Perhaps he won't. It's a long, arduous road he's starting to travel, but it may be that at the end of it he'll find what he's seeking.
What's that?
Hasn't it occurred to you? God.
God.
Well, the thing that happened to Larry in the war, terrible shock of whatever it was, must have filled him with a sense of the transience of life, and an anguish to be sure that there was a compensation for the sin and sorrow of the world.
Isn't all that awfully morbid? One has to take the world as it comes. If we're here, it's surely to make the most of life.
Well, you're probably right.
I don't pretend to be anything but a perfectly normal, ordinary girl. I want to have fun. Larry's got the star part in this. He's the idealist, the dreamer of a beautiful dream. Common sense like mine is never very sympathetic, is it? But I'm the one who'd have to pay, don't forget.
I don't forget.
Mother and Uncle Elliot approve of what I've done. Do you approve, too?
I think you've done right for you.
Then why have I a bad conscience?
Have you?
If I only loved him enough, I'd think the world well lost.
Or, if he loved you enough, he wouldn't have hesitated to do what you want. How much do you love him?
I don't know. I'm impatient with him. I'm exasperated with him. And I keep longing for him.
You know, when you're in love and things go all wrong, you're terribly unhappy, and you think you won't ever get over it. My dear Miss Bradley.
Isabel,
you'll be astounded to learn what the sea will do.
what do you mean?
Well, love isn't a good sailor, and it languishes on a sea voyage, especially on an ocean liner that's crossing the Atlantic. Soon enough, how far away all this is going to seem to you. The following year, Isabel was married to Gray Maturin, about which Elliot, my correspondent, meant his to be the final word.
Done with as much pomp as the Episcopalian Church could afford. Not like a wedding at Notre Dame, but for a Protestant affair, it didn't lack style.
A year later, Isabel was delivered of a daughter, Joan. 2 years after that came a second daughter.
She is called Priscilla, would you believe? I understand it's the fashionable name.
His sister called me. She was enjoying the very good fortune of being Mrs. Louisa Bradley.
You will recall Henry Maturin, Gray's father.
Indeed.
He took Gray into partnership with him. The firm has never been more prosperous, I assure you.
Elliot, not to be outdone, had his say.
They're making money hand over fist, my dear fellow. Why, Gray, at the age of 25, is making $50,000 a year. And that's only a beginning. The resources of America are inexhaustible. It isn't a boom, it's just the natural development of a great country. Henry Maturin can't live forever, high blood pressure, you know. And by the time Gray gets to 40, he should be worth $20 million. Princely, my dear fellow.
I would have to say I've done very well by Henry Maturin. That business acumen of his.
And your brother, too?
Indubitably, Mr. Maugham. Both of us. Now, at one time I wouldn't have dreamed of discussing private financial matters.
Naturally not.
But these are different times. Isabel's father-in-law has put our money into sound securities. They've performed really very well indeed.
Elliot, however, out-siblinged her as direct as ever when we next met.
So here I am in 1926. I'm nearly twice as rich as I was 8 years ago, without stirring a finger even. Death, duties, and war profiteering, they've ruined English society. People don't seem to mind who they know. Take my word for it, my dear fellow. English society is as dead as the dodo.
Really?
Yes.
Irredeemably?
Not that I find France much better. The great ladies of my youth, if they're still alive, they've given themselves over to piety, care of their grandchildren, and bridge.
Well, bridge has its good
It's
points.
a game I simply loathe.
Oh.
Bridge. Society nowadays, it's manufacturers, Argentines, Chileans. American women divorced or separated. They're the ones living in the stately houses of the aristocracy, lauding it, and the lavishness of their entertainment.
You don't approve.
You find there, who? Politicians, speaking French with such a vulgar accent. Journalists, what deplorable table manners. And even actors.
Is it all bad?
Noblemen's sons marrying the daughters of shopkeepers.
Ah, well.
Paris is gay, yes, but so shoddily gay. Just look around you. The young are devoted to the mad pursuit of pleasure.
Oh, pleasure.
Nothing is more amusing, don't you know, than to go from one stuffy little nightclub to another, drinking champagne at 100 francs a bottle, dancing along with the riffraff of the town till 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't stand the smoke, the heat, and the noise makes my head ache.
Poor fellow.
Where's the city I made my spiritual home 30 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
They used to say that here in Paris was where we good Americans went to when we died.
That's true.
No more, no more. The world is too much with me. I have now reached a time of my life when I'm prepared to enjoy the beauties of nature.
Yes? How do you propose to do that?
We're heading south.
We are?
The Riviera is about to become the resort of rank and fashion. It used to be, and it will be so again. Take my word. My inner monitor tells me the most beau of the beau monde. That's where you'll find us.
It is Mr. Maugham, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
I thought it was.
And you are...
Do you remember dinner one evening in Chicago? Long ago now. We were seated next to each other. You asked me some questions.
And you told me who everyone at the table was. Yes, I remember.
I'm Sophie.
Sophie. I never knew your surname.
It's MacDonald now.
You're married?
Oh, it's a long story.
What brings you to Paris?
I'm looking around.
A tourist?
No, looking for somewhere to settle, maybe. A new life.
Ah.
Everyone washes up in Paris, don't they?
You, me, that's true. I'd love to talk to you, dinner or lunch or something. I'm expecting company very shortly, I'm afraid.
I heard that Larry Darrell came to Paris.
Yes, he did, but he disappeared again.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I was thinking...
Let's make a date, shall we? Tomorrow, lunch?
Yes, that suits fine.
Excellent. 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
The Bourgogne is rather fun. Do you know where it is?
The girl next door knows everything. She'll give me directions.
Well, I could tell you now if you like.
Your people have arrived, I think?
Oh, I'll see you then, Mrs. MacDonald. Sophie.
I really would like to ask your advice.
We'll sort everything out. I promise. There were 2 Bourgognes in Paris. 2 at least. Somehow we missed each other. Who knows how differently things might have turned out if we had only... C'est la vie. As for Elliot, now began the most splendid period of his life in Antibes. I too bought a house there, on Cap Ferrat, and so saw a good deal of Elliot.
You can come to my grandest parties, as a favor to me, dear fellow.
I am in your good graces.
Their Royal Highnesses are the most ungrateful people in the world. They'll use you, and when there's no further purpose in it, they'll cast you aside like a frayed shirt.
I believe you're on good terms with the local authorities.
You do your research thoroughly.
My reviewers don't always agree about that.
The prefect of the district and the bishop himself.
Oh, I'm humbled.
You? I don't imagine it for a moment.
Isabel and Gray and Mrs. Bradley were due to come the following year.
I want to see them all enjoying themselves. Vita brevis, carpe diem, no? In the South here especially, one feels that. Life is short, so seize the day. How beautiful it all is.
It's perfect. But before this year, 1929, was out, the New York market broke.
Gray has been wiped out. You know that?
Yes.
They had to sell everything. It's best the father didn't live to see it.
What about you, Elliot?
I'm not complaining.
So I see.
A month before the crash, I went to Rome. I thought it a bore having to go because Rome is empty then. But my sense of Catholic duty prevailed over my desire for worldly pleasures.
You're a blessed soul, Elliot.
I don't think I appreciate the tone of that remark.
You were in Rome.
Like a veritable tomb. But I was rewarded.
A papal medal?
More practical than that. My friends at the Vatican told me that the collapse was coming. They strongly advised me to sell all my American securities. The Holy Church has the wisdom of 20 centuries behind it, and I didn't hesitate for a moment. I cabled to Henry Maturin to sell everything and buy gold, and I instructed Louisa to do the same. My poor sister paid no attention to my advice, and she suffered for it. The mental strain, the toll on her heart.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I did what I could.
What about you? The crash, and you were sitting pretty?
An Americanism, my dear fellow, which I see no occasion for you to use. But it expresses my situation with a good deal of accuracy. I lost nothing. In fact, I made what you would probably call a packet.
Elliot kept up his standards. He didn't dismiss his staff. He didn't reduce their wages. He continued to serve the best food and wines, and royalty and nobility deigned to sit at his table. He gave generously to the bishop's charity for the workless. He lived as if there hadn't been a crisis, and half the world wasn't staggering on. But even he didn't escape so easily.
How strange it is to be back in Chicago, sitting here in Louisa's house to write to you, and to know that I won't ever hear her enter this room again, or look up and see her watching me with that peculiar intimate concern which siblings will use to one another. May she now rest in peace. Alas, Gray's efforts to stave off disaster for one and all, the anxiety and humiliation resulted, I have since discovered, in a nervous breakdown. His headaches would incapacitate him for the full 24 hours. They've been reduced to living at the plantation in South Carolina old Maturin once gave them. I cannot allow this state of affairs. Why, my dear fellow, they live there like pigs. Isabel without a maid, no governess for the children. So, I've offered them my apartment in Paris and proposed that they should stay there till things change in this fantastic country.
Elliot Templeton. An arch snob? Yes, most definitely so. But also, let me say, the kindest, most considerate and generous of men. But this is also Larry's story. Larry, we would discover, was half a world away.
Good morning, Mr. Darrell. Did you have a restful night?
Afraid not. I didn't get a blink of sleep.
I'm sorry to hear that.
You're as fresh as a daisy. How come?
By meditation on the formless one.
Pardon me?
I found rest in the absolute. If you stay here long enough, you will understand. You will learn to sleep.
I will.
Everything is strange to you, but you want to learn. Why else is a young American gentleman traveling on the train to Benares?
Because I happened to meet you again. At the temple. Only you weren't the passenger on the ship anymore. You were wearing a saffron robe. What were the chances of me recognizing you?
Perhaps you were looking for me.
I think I was.
Benares, my friend?
I want to see the Ganges, the pilgrims.
I will show you.
Will you?
We shall go at dawn.
What happens at dawn?
They stand in the river and pray.
Pray to who? To what?
To the rising sun.
I want to meet the believers. After 3 decades of the 20th century, they can believe.
They believe completely, with every fiber of their being.
Yesterday,
Yes?
back at the caves of Elfanta, the 3 heads, you said they were the 3 manifestations of the...
Ultimate reality.
Yes,
You remember what they were?
the Creator, the Preserver, the
Destroyer.
Destroyer.
And you told me you didn't understand.
And you said you weren't surprised. Maybe I do begin to understand about the Destroyer anyway, in our Western world.
Be patient.
I didn't know if you were mocking me or not.
A God that can be understood is no God. Who can explain the infinite in words?
Yesterday, I felt my heart beating like mad. India has something to give me that I have to have.
We're really proper Parisians now, aren't we? What is it?
You have the Parisians chic.
Oh, merci bien. That is a compliment.
Certainly it is.
You know, it tickles me to death to think that we're living like quite rich people when really we're absolutely broke.
Is it as bad as that?
Gray hasn't a penny, and I have almost exactly the income Larry had when he wanted me to marry him, and I wouldn't because I thought we couldn't possibly live on it, and now I've got 2 children besides. It's rather funny, isn't it?
I'm glad you can see the joke of it.
Gray's gone to Montfontaine to play golf. He'll be in presently. You must see my 2 little girls. They've gone to the Tuileries Gardens, but they ought to be back soon. They're sweet.
En famille, I'd like that.
What news have you of Larry?
Larry.
Where is he?
Never far from our minds.
Tell me.
I haven't set eyes on him since you were last in Paris. No one seemed to know anything about him. He just vanished.
We know the manager of the bank in Chicago where Larry has his account. He told us that every now and then he got a draft from some queer place, China, Burma, India. He seems to have been getting around.
Do you...
What's that?
No.
You were going to ask me something.
Do you wish now that you had married him?
I've been very happy with Gray. He's been a wonderful husband. Do you know he's never said an unkind or harsh thing to me all these years we've been married? Oh, I've been very lucky.
It'll be good to see Gray again.
Uncle Elliot's supporting us in this apartment has been a godsend. Gray's nerves went all to pieces, and he still has those terrible headaches. Even if he could get a job, he isn't really fit to take it, and naturally that worries him. He wants to work. He feels he ought to, and it humiliates him not to be wanted. You see, he feels it's a man's business to work, and if he can't work, he may just as well be dead.
I'm afraid you've had a very rough time of it these last 2.5 years.
I don't regret anything. I had a lot of fun while it lasted, and now that it's gone, it's gone.
Yes. Ruin is easier to bear in a luxurious apartment, a fashionable quartier with a competent butler and an excellent cook, free and for nothing, and when one can cover one's haggard bones with a dress by Chanel. Isn't it?
Lanvin, actually. I see you haven't changed much in 10 years. I don't suppose you'll believe me, being a cynical brute, but I'm not sure if I'd have accepted Uncle Elliot's offer except for Gray and the children. On my $2,800 a year, we could have managed perfectly well on the plantation, and we'd have grown rice and rye and corn and kept pigs. After all, I was born and raised on a farm in Illinois.
In a manner of speaking, correct me, but didn't you first see the light of day in an expensive clinic in New York? Put that cushion down.
Oh, you appalling man!
I fell into the habit of dropping in to see Isabel 3 or 4 times a week in the afternoon when writing for the day was over for me. I never came into her presence without a little thrill of pleasure at what I saw, the loveliness of her outer form to match her inner nature. She had a charming way of treating me as if she and I were of an age. It made conversation easy. We joked and laughed and chaffed one another. We talked about ourselves, other people, about books and pictures. And then a very unexpected thing happened. I was sitting one evening at the Dome. Since the terrace was crowded, I had been forced to take a table in the front row.
You don't remember me.
I've never set eyes on you in my life.
It's Larry.
Good heavens, sit down. Larry! Have a drink. Garçon, another glass. How could you expect me to recognize you with all that hair on your face?
Oh, this.
How long have you been in Paris?
A month.
Are you going to stay?
For a while.
Yeah. Thank you. Your good health.
And yours, sir.
Are you down and out?
No. I'm all right. What makes you think that?
Well, you look as if you could do with a square meal. The things you've got on are only fit for the garbage can.
Are they as bad as all that? I never thought about it. As a matter of fact, I have been meaning to get myself a few odds and ends, but I never seem able to get down to it.
Don't be a fool, Larry. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm not poor. If you're short of cash, let me lend you a few thousand francs. Don't break the bank.
Thanks a lot, but I'm not short of cash. I got more money than I can spend.
Notwithstanding the crash?
Oh, that didn't affect me.
So, where have you come from now?
India.
Oh, yes, I'd heard you'd been there. Isabel told me. She apparently knows the manager of your bank in Chicago.
Isabel? When did you last see her?
Yesterday.
She's not in Paris.
She is, indeed.
That's grand. I'd love to see her.
Gray's here, too. You know they're married.
Yes. And is Elliot here, too?
No, he's built himself a church.
What?
And equipping it. So he can purchase all those wonderful ecclesiastical things. And he's really doing it for his greater glory.
Elliot Templeton's?
No. God's.
And Gray, how's he?
He's put on weight. He's older.
How's he liking Paris?
I'm afraid he's feeling rather lost here. He seems fine, but he's putting on a show. I think his confidence has taken a lot of knocks.
Yeah?
His confidence in himself, in the order of things. Some of the light has gone out of his eyes. You'll see for yourself.
Yes. Yes, I'd love to see them.
It was one day when Isabel and I were drinking tea, and Gray was sipping at his whiskey.
Larry! Larry! Oh, you found us!
Gee, I'm glad to see you, Larry.
Isn't this just perfect? All of us together again.
Have a drink, old man.
I'll have a cup of tea.
Oh, gosh, you don't want tea? Let's have a bottle of champagne.
I would prefer tea.
You can have whatever you like. Now, please sit down. Why didn't you come and see us at once, you horror?
You've been getting yourself spruced up, haven't you? And done it very well, if I may say so.
It's 10 years since I've seen you, Larry. What have you been up to?
Oh, I've been loafing around, Europe first, and then I knocked about the East for a bit.
Where have you just come from now?
India.
How long were you there?
5 years.
Did you have fun? Shoot any tigers?
No.
What on earth were you doing with yourself in India for 5 years?
Playing about.
What about the rope trick? Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
What did you see?
A lot.
How many languages do you know now, Larry?
Half a dozen or so.
Tell me about the yogis. You got to know them?
As well as you can know persons who pass the best part of their lives in the infinite. I spent 2 years with one in his ashrama.
2 years? What's an ashrama?
A hermitage. I had a tiny hut in the compound just big enough for my camp bed. A chair and a table and a bookshelf.
Where was that?
In Travancore.
Where?
It's a beautiful country of green hills and valleys and soft flowing rivers.
Drink, anyone?
Oh, no thanks, Gray.
Well, I'm going to have one. What about you, Isabel?
Were there other white men there?
No, I was the only one.
How could you stand it for 2 years?
They passed like a flash. I spent single days that seemed to me longer.
What did you do with yourself all the time?
I read. I took long walks. I went out on a boat on the lagoon. I meditated. Meditation is very hard work. After 2 or 3 hours of it, you're as exhausted as if you'd driven a car 500 miles. And all you want to do is rest.
What was your yogi like?
He never wore anything but a loincloth, and yet he managed to look as trim and neat and well-dressed as a young man in one of Brooks Brothers' advertisements.
And what had he got that particularly attracted you?
Saintliness.
Say that again?
We've read all about our famous saints, but that was hundreds of years ago. I never thought it possible to meet one who was alive now. From the first time I saw him, I never doubted that he was a saint. It was a wonderful experience.
And what did you gain from it?
Peace. I must go.
Oh, no, not yet, Larry. It's quite early.
Good night. I'll see you again in a day or two.
Where are you staying? I'll call you.
Oh, don't bother to do that. You know how difficult it is to get a call through in Paris. And in any case, our telephone is generally out of order.
We got hold of Larry when he called me, and we were all due to eat out, but there was a last-minute hitch.
Gray's got one of his headaches. He's in agony. I can't leave him.
He wouldn't go to bed when he had a headache. We found him in Eliot's library. Have you given him any aspirin?
Oh, that never does any good.
I have an American prescription, but that doesn't help either.
Will you let me see if I can help you?
And it was there, in the library, that something distinctly odd happened. There were 3 experiments. Larry gave Gray a coin.
Make no effort, but hold the coin in your clenched fist, palm held down. Before I count to 20, your hand will open and the coin will drop out of it.
Gray's hand seemed to be worked on by some exterior influence. At 18, 19, his hand could resist no longer.
Look, Mr. Maugham.
And the coin fell out of his hand and rolled to my feet. It was heavy and misshapen and ancient, with the youthful head of Alexander the Great on it.
Let yourself go quite slack.
The next experiment.
Take it easy. Do nothing. Don't resist. Before I count to 20, your right arm will rise from the arm of the chair until your hand is above your head.
Very slowly and evenly, the arm rose.
13, 14.
It was as if a force independent of the mind was directing the motion. After 20, the arm, fully extended, fell back of its own weight onto the arm of a chair.
I didn't lift my arm.
I saw, darling.
I couldn't help its rising like that. It did it of its own accord.
Now, where's that Greek coin?
Here it is.
Experiment number 3. Hold it in your hand, Gray. In 60 seconds, your eyelids will grow so heavy you'll need to close them. And then you'll sleep. You'll sleep for 6 minutes.
Which is exactly what he did.
Gosh.
He's waking.
I believed I dropped off to sleep.
The color's back in his face, see?
And my headache's gone. The awful pain is gone.
Has it, darling?
That's fine. Have a cigarette and then we'll all go out to dinner.
It's a miracle. I feel perfectly swell. How did you do it?
I didn't do it. You did it yourself.
I didn't believe you could do a thing, you know. I just gave in because I felt too lousy to argue.
Did you learn to do that sort of thing in India?
Yes.
Gray suffers agonies. If you could cure him, it would just improve his whole life so much.
I can't work miracles, you know.
But I've just witnessed a miracle.
No. I merely put an idea into old Gray's head, and he did the rest himself.
Tell me something. Why does Larry make a secret of his address? Polly, here!
Hasn't it struck you that when he's with us, easy as he is to get on with, friendly, sociable, one's conscious of a sort of detachment in him?
I suppose I know what you mean. Everyone's having fun, and then you think he's just like one of us, and then suddenly you have the feeling that he's escaped you, like a smoke ring you try to catch in your hands. Here, Folly! Here, Folly!
Imagine christening a dog Folly.
Oh, don't listen to him, Folly, the silly man.
Are you very much in love with Larry?
God damn you. I've never loved anyone else in my life.
Why did you marry Gray?
I had to marry somebody. He was mad about me, and Mama wanted me to marry him. Everyone told me I was well rid of Larry. I'm very fond of Gray, still.
I wonder if Larry was ever really in love with you.
What are you talking about? Of course he was in love with me.
Well, I think he expected himself to be in love with you. He'd known you forever. It seemed such a natural thing that you should marry.
But you're going to tell me differently?
Unless love is passion, it's not love, it's something else. And passion thrives not on satisfaction, but on impediment.
Is this you or the writer talking?
You made a rich marriage. Larry roamed the world to find out what song the sirens sang. Passion didn't enter into it.
How do you know?
Passion doesn't count the cost. Passion is destructive. And if it doesn't destroy, it dies.
Paris de mes amours, il y a bien à faire, on te revient toujours.
Paris in the spring. It's like drinking at the fountain of youth. I wanted to delight in each passing moment. I saw as much as I could of my friends, Isabel, Gray, and Larry. Gray was much better. His racking headache stopped thanks to Larry's hypnosis, was it? Gray didn't speak much, told a long-winded story now and then, and laughed a lot at the nonsense I talked with Isabel. One day, in the back of a car, it was Isabel who was in a state of trance. I saw her staring at Larry's arm, just staring at the sinewy wrist with its little golden hairs and the long, delicate but powerful hand. The beauty was stripped from her face. She looked suddenly hideous and frightening.
Give me a cigarette, will you?
She shut her eyes, shuddered. Poor Isabel. What might have been. I was due to return south. My last night in Paris. Dinner.
I want you to do me one very special final favor.
What is that?
Take us on a guided tour of the tough joints.
What?
The really disreputable places we oughtn't to be anywhere near.
We ended up in a cafe in the Rue de Lappe, which was about as bad as it got. And there...
Oh no, look everyone.
Paris crossed tracks with Chicago.
Well, hello! Look who it is.
Does she know us?
Sophie.
Yes, who the hell did you think it was? Hey, Vincent, fetch me a chair.
Push one yourself.
Ay, you salaud! Oh, fancy meeting you all like this. Hello, Larry. Hello, Gray. Hey, patron!
Well, Sophie MacDonald. You know these people, Sophie?
They are my childhood friends. I am buying a bottle of champagne for them, and don't bring us any of your urine de cheval. Bring us something we can swallow without vomiting.
You're drunk, my poor Sophie.
Oh, to hell with you.
You remember Mr. Somerset Maugham? He came to Chicago once.
And didn't I say I thought he was a bit of a stuffed shirt?
Sophie.
Larry knows when I'm telling a gag.
Maybe that is what I am.
No, you're a decent enough fellow. Don't know you're Burgoyne from your ass, but I forgive you.
Fancy our paths crossing like this.
I can't say. You seem so terribly pleased to see me.
I heard you were in Paris.
You might have called me. I'm in the phone book.
We haven't been here very long.
Are you having a good time over here, Sophie?
Fine. Now, you went bust in the crash, Gray, didn't you?
Yes.
Oh, tough on you. Oh, why doesn't that bastard bring us something to drink? Come on! My loving in-laws kicked me out of Chicago. You don't seem to have much to say for yourself, Larry.
I'm not a very talkative guy.
Well, here's the champagne.
Me first. It's my treat. Now, here is to stuffed shirts.
Come on, Sophie, we're going to dance.
Go away. I'm busy. Can't you see I'm with friends?
To hell with your friends. You're dancing.
Always loser!
Ooh, take care, Coco. Gray could eat you out cold. Are you living in Paris, Larry?
For the present.
Now, if I don't go back to my boyfriend, he'll be as mad as hell, but, boy, does he give me what I want in bed. So long, folks. Come again. I am here every night.
This is a foul place. Let's go.
You asked for it.
I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I've had a grand evening.
Hell, it stank. And Sophie.
Do you remember her at all? She sat next to you the first night you came to dinner with us.
I do remember.
She hadn't got that awful red hair then. Married a boy called Bob McDonald, one of the best-looking boys I ever saw. A lawyer, not much money. I never understood what he saw in her, but they were just crazy about one another. They had a baby. They worshipped it. One night they were all driving back to Chicago, and a bunch of drunks driving at 80 miles an hour crashed into them head-on.
How awful.
Bob and the baby were killed outright, but Sophie only had concussion and broken ribs. They kept it from her as long as they could that Bob and the baby were dead. When she heard, she shrieked the place down. They had to watch her night and day. She nearly managed to throw herself out of the window. Of course, we did all we could, but she seemed to hate us. After she came out of hospital, they put her in a sanatorium. She was there for months.
Poor thing.
When they let her go, she started to drink. And when she was drunk, she'd go to bed with anyone who asked her. It was terrible for her in-laws. She got in with a bad crowd.
I can't help feeling sorry for her.
Can't you? I can. Of course, it was a shock. No one could have sympathized with Sophie more than I did. We'd known one another always. But a normal person recovers from a thing like that. If she went to pieces, it's because there was a rotten streak in her.
Aren't you being a bit hard on her, Isabel?
I don't think so. I have common sense, and I see no reason to be sentimental about Sophie.
No? Even after all she's been through?
She was naturally unbalanced. Even her love for Bob was exaggerated. If she'd had character, she'd have been able to make something of her life.
I remember her when she was 14, with her freckled, serious face.
You knew her, Larry?
She was a modest, idealistic child. She wrote poetry. She read everything she could get hold of, and we used to talk about books.
When was this?
Oh, when you were out being social with your mother.
I never knew she wrote poetry.
She kept it a secret. She was afraid you'd all laugh at her. She was very shy.
She's not that now.
When I came back from the war, she was almost grown up. She'd read a lot about the condition of the working classes. She'd seen something of that for herself in Chicago. She wanted to become a social worker. I find it moving.
Moving?
Her desire for sacrifice. I think she was capable of a great deal.
How did she come to choose you for her confidant?
I don't know. She was a poor girl among all of you who had plenty of dough, and I didn't belong.
Did it ever occur to you that Sophie was in love with you?
Never.
When he came back from the war as a wounded hero, half the girls in Chicago had a crush on Larry.
This was more than a crush. She worshipped you, my poor Larry. Do you mean to say that you didn't know it?
I certainly didn't, and I don't believe it.
I suppose you thought she was too high-minded.
I can still see that skinny little girl and her serious face, reading Keats to me and thinking it was so beautiful, and her eyes with tears in them. I wonder where she is now.
Society is dead.
Is it, Elliot? Or is that the view from the Côte d'Azur?
My poor country is becoming hopelessly middle class. You wouldn't believe it, my dear fellow, but the last time I was in America, a taxi driver addressed me as brother.
Yeah, the Riviera. Hasn't that changed too?
Of course, it's a very mixed crowd, but one doesn't have to talk to people one doesn't want to.
Why don't you take things more easily?
My dear fellow, at my age, one can't afford to fall out. You don't think I've moved in the highest circles for nearly 50 years without realizing that if you're not seen everywhere, you're forgotten.
Come round at once. Something terrible has happened while you've been away. Don't bring Uncle Elliot. Oh, for heaven's sake, come as soon as you can.
Say that again, Isabel.
Larry is going to marry Sophie MacDonald.
I see.
Oh, don't say it like that. She's a drunken slut. That filthy cafe.
Who knows why you took us to a place like that? Gray was disgusted.
Isabel,
He came and told me himself. Larry, yesterday afternoon, I've been frantic.
Calm down a little.
She's soused from morning till night. She goes to bed with every tough who asks her.
That doesn't mean she's bad. I call a person bad who lies and cheats and is unkind.
If you're going to take her part, I'll kill you.
How did Larry meet her again?
The phone book.
She was sick, and no wonder with the life she leads. He got a doctor and someone in to look after her, and that's how it started. He says she's given up drink. The damn fool thinks she's cured.
Have you forgotten what Larry did for Gray?
Well, that's different. Gray wanted to be cured. She doesn't.
How do you know?
Because I know women. Sooner or later she'll break out. It's a brute she wants. That's what excites her. She'll lead Larry a hell of a life. Do you think I sacrificed myself to let Larry fall into the hands of a raging nymphomaniac?
How did you sacrifice yourself?
I gave Larry up for the one and only reason that I didn't want to stand in his way.
Come off it, Isabel. You gave him up for a square-cut diamond and a sable coat.
Get out, now. I never want to see you again, and I hate the sight of you.
I'm sorry for that, because the sight of you always gives me pleasure. You've got exquisite legs, so long and shapely, and I never cease to be surprised at them, because they were thick and lumpy when you were a girl. I can't imagine how you managed it.
An iron will and the grace of God, you horror. Oh.
What is it?
What's what?
Something else in your mind?
You're really my favorite old horror in the world.
Yes, Isabel?
Will you ask her to lunch? Please.
Why should I do that?
It would be rather awkward for me after what I said to Larry yesterday.
Will you behave if I do?
Like an angel of light.
I'll fix it up right away.
Oh.
My little party at the Ritz went rather well, if I do say so myself.
And where are you going for your honeymoon, my dear?
We're going to Greece.
I've been trying to get there for 10 years.
Elliot didn't flag.
You never have headaches now, Gray?
Not for 3 months. If I think one's coming on, I take hold of my charm. This ancient coin Larry gave me, and I'm all right. I wouldn't sell it for $1 million.
Elliot was our star turn.
Albert, let me see the Zubrovka, will you? Very hard to find nowadays. Polish form of vodka, but far superior. Albert says it's good for the kidneys, so maybe I can disobey my doctor's instructions. No alcohol. We used to drink Zubrovka at the Ratsvilles when I stayed with them for the shooting.
Only Elliot and Isabel partook.
Oh, what a lovely smell.
That's the herbs they put in it.
It tastes divine. I've never tasted anything so good.
How it brings back the old days.
I'm so glad to know about it. Gray, we must get some.
A fortnight later, in London, I called in on Elliot at Claridge's. So tell me, how did the wedding go off?
It didn't go on.
What do you mean?
3 days before the big day, Sophie disappeared. Larry hunted for her everywhere.
Extraordinary. Did they have a row?
No, far from it. Everything had been arranged. Isabel was even providing a dress from Molyneux's. Isabel asked her to come to the apartment so they could go for the final fitting. Sophie came, all right, but Isabel had to take one of the children to the dentist, and by the time she got back, Sophie had gone. She wasn't at Molyneux's. Then Larry discovered from Sophie's concierge that she'd been in and packed a bag and left.
She didn't write or anything?
Nothing.
What do you make of it?
My dear fellow, exactly what you make of it. She couldn't stick it out again. She was back on the booze.
How's Larry?
He won't discuss it. Isabel says he was never in love with Sophie. He was only marrying her out of a misguided chivalry. That's her point of view.
Of course it is. A year passed. Elliot wasn't keeping so well. I was writing a novel. I took a break on a cutter. It worked its way along the coast towards Marseille, which was how I ended up in Toulon. That's a port I've always had an affection for. I've never tired of wandering about its old streets. I can linger for hours on the quay. Toulon, you can imagine like a terminal on which all the wide ways of the world converge. And as you sit in a cafe, your eyes a little dazzled by the brightness of the sea and sky, your fancy takes golden journeys to the uttermost parts of the earth. Should I have been surprised that there, sitting with an empty glass in front of her, I saw Sophie.
Join me for a drink.
You have one with me.
Thank you. How are all the folks in Paris?
I haven't seen them since our lunch party.
Ah.
I think they're all right.
I didn't marry Larry after all.
I know. Why not?
Darling, when it came to the point, I couldn't see myself being Mary Magdalene to his Jesus Christ. No, sir.
She had gone to the apartment to meet Isabel. Isabel had had to go out, but left a message to say she'd be back soon.
The coffee things were still on the table, and I asked their man if I could have a cup. Coffee was the only thing that kept me going. He said he'd bring some and took the empty cups and the coffee pot away. He left a bottle on the tray. I looked at it, and it was that Polish stuff you'd talked about at the Ritz.
Zubrowka. That was it, really. She was taking the first steps back on the road to ruin.
I thought I'd pour out a glass and look at it. It had such a pretty color.
Pale green.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. Its color is just like its smell. I had to see if that was how it tasted. I only meant to take a sip, and then I heard a sound. I thought it was Isabel coming in, and I swallowed the glassful because I didn't want her to catch me. Gosh, it made me feel good. I really began to feel alive again. If Isabel had come in then, I suppose I'd be married to Larry now. There wasn't much left in the bottle by the time I was through.
Then, what did you do?
I headed off to Hakim's.
What?
Oh, Hakim's an Algerian, and he can always get his hands on some opium for you. He'll get you anything you want. I don't know how many men I didn't have. All shapes, sizes, and colors. I made up for lost time, all right. Life's hell, but if there's any fun to be got out of it, you're only a goddamn fool if you don't get it. Hey, if I buy that new book of yours, will you write in it?
I'll send a copy to your hotel.
My boyfriend's over there. He's a Corsican, and as jealous as they come. Dumb, but beautiful.
You like 'em tough, Sophie, don't you?
The tougher, the better.
One of these days, you'll get your throat cut.
I wouldn't be surprised. Good riddance to bad rubbish.
I must be going.
It's nice to have seen you. Don't forget the book.
I won't.
Mr. Willie.
Thank you, Joseph. How is he?
The pauvre monsieur. His kidneys are diseased, the doctor says. He takes a grave view.
How long have you been with Mr. Templeton, Joseph?
40 years, sir. Sooner or later it had to happen. He must die.
I'm sure he's provided for you, Joseph.
One must hope it.
I was surprised when he ushered me into the bedroom. Elliot was looking very spry. How are you feeling?
Perfectly well. It's only a temporary indisposition. It's too bad that this should happen just now. It's a particularly brilliant season. Are you going to Princess Novamali's party?
No, of course not.
Has she asked you?
She's asked everyone on the Riviera.
What are you going to wear?
I told you, Elliot, I'm not going. You don't think I'm going to parade in fancy dress at my time of life?
She hasn't asked me. It's a deliberate insult.
Oh, Elliot, I'm sure it's an oversight.
I'm not a man that people overlook.
Anyhow, you wouldn't have been well enough to go.
Of course I should. The best party of the season. If I were on my deathbed, I'd get up for it.
Perhaps not all the invitations have gone out yet.
She's not going to ask me, the old bitch. She'd never have got anywhere without me. I gave parties for her. I introduced her to everyone she knows. She sleeps with her chauffeur, you know.
Oh, really?
She's going to have fireworks. I love fireworks. It's so unkind. I hate them. I hate them all. There's not one of them who cares if I live or die. Oh, it's so cruel. I wish I'd never left America.
Never mind, Elliot. It may rain on the night of the party.
I'll pray to God for rain as I've never prayed before. That'll bitch it, won't it?
Mr. Maugham, it's yourself.
Dear Miss Keith, the princess is taking the crowd around the garden, so I thought I'd come in and smoke a cigarette with you.
You're very welcome.
I'll come to the point.
As you like, Mr. Maugham.
My friend, Mr. Templeton...
She crossed his name off the list herself.
He's awfully hurt being left out.
If he wanted to keep in with the princess, he'd have been wiser not to tell everyone that she goes to bed with her chauffeur. And him with a wife and 3 children.
And does she?
I've been a secretary for 21 years, my dear sir, and I've made it a rule to believe all my employers are as pure as the driven snow.
Miss Keith, I didn't come here to smoke a cigarette with you.
No, sir.
I thought you might be at lunch. I came to snitch an invitation and send it to Mr. Templeton myself.
Oh, that would have been a very unscrupulous thing to do.
Granted. Be a good sport, Miss Keith. Give me a card. He won't come, and it'll make the poor old man happy. You've got nothing against him, have you?
No, he's always been very civil to me. He's a gentleman, and you can't say it of most of them.
Come on, Miss Keith, have a heart.
I am sure you wish me to do nothing disloyal to my employer, Mr. Maugham. Besides which, the old cow would fire me if she found out I'd disobeyed her. The cards are on the desk in their envelopes. I am going to look out of the window, partly to stretch my legs, which are cramped from sitting too long in one position, and also to observe the beauty of the prospect. What happens when my back is turned, neither God nor man can hold me responsible for.
It's been very nice to see you, Miss Keith. Oh, what are you wearing to the fancy dress party?
I am a minister's daughter, my dear sir. I leave such foolishness to the upper classes. I shall be comfy in my bed with a good detective story.
Look, I've had my invitation. It came this morning.
It's what I told you. You see, your name begins with a T. The secretary's only just reached you.
I want to show you my costume.
You're not thinking of going, Elliot?
Of course I am. It's a copy of what Philip II is wearing in Titian's portrait of the Prado. Gorgeous.
Mr. Maugham, this is Joseph.
Is something the matter, Joseph?
I must inform you that Mr. Templeton had another bad attack during the night. The doctor is here now. He says maybe Mr. Templeton will not last another day.
The bishop himself came, and the Monsignor and I partook of the body and blood of Christ. I have always moved in the best society in Europe, and I have no doubt that I shall move in the best society in heaven.
You are incorrigible, Elliot.
Not speaking of the best society, I haven't answered Edna Novamali's invitation.
Oh, don't bother about that now, Elliot.
I've always been a man of the world. There's no reason why I should forget my manners as I'm leaving it. Now, there's a pad of writing paper. I shall dictate to you.
Very well.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Mr. Elliot Templeton regrets that he cannot accept Princess Novamali's kind invitation, owing to a previous engagement with his blessed Lord. The old bitch.
These were the last words he spoke. I stayed up with him. I sat on in darkness, dozing off and on. The night was warm, and the windows wide open. At regular intervals the flash of the lighthouse swept the room with a passing glimmer. The moon, which when full would look upon the vacuous, noisy gaiety of Edna Novamale's fancy dress party, set. And in the sky, a deep, deep blue, the countless stars shone with a terrifying brilliance. I went over to the bed, and by the gleam of the lighthouse ray, I felt Eliot's pulse.
Eliot? Can you hear me?
He was dead. Back in Paris, I went to the Théâtre Français to see Berenice. I suppose only a Frenchman can appreciate to the full the grace and grandeur of Racine and the music of his verse, but even a foreigner, once he's accustomed himself to the periwigged formality of the style, he can only be moved by Racine's passionate tenderness, by the nobility of his sentiment. During the interval, as I was smoking, someone touched me on the shoulder.
Larry!
It's been a while, hasn't it?
How long?
A year?
I'm delighted. Let's have a drink afterwards, a beer.
I'm hungry. I haven't eaten yet.
Supper.
Montmartre?
Eggs and bacon. Why not?
Yes, I see Isabel.
Gray'll be glad to get back to America. He's a fish out of water here. He won't be happy until he's to work again. I dare say he'll make a lot of money.
If he does, it'll be due to you. You know, you not only cured him in body, but in spirit as well. You restored his confidence.
I did very little. I merely showed him how to cure himself.
How did you learn?
From an old yogi. Afterwards, I was in the Himalayas with an Indian friend of mine, and he sprained his ankle. It was impossible to get a doctor, and he was in great pain. It worked with him. He conquered the pain. Nothing to it, really.
Easier said than done.
I found I was able to relieve people not only of pain, but of fear.
Yes?
It's strange how many people suffer from it.
Fear?
I don't mean fear of closed spaces and fear of heights, but fear of death. And what's worse, fear of life. Often, there are people who seem in the best of health, prosperous, without any worry, and yet they're tortured by it.
What made you go to India in the first place?
Chance. At least I thought so at the time. Almost all the people who have had the most effect on me I seem to have met by chance. Yet, looking back, it seems as though I couldn't but have met them. It's as if they were waiting there to be called upon when I needed them.
Why India, though?
Europe sent me there. I went to India because I wanted a rest. I've been working very hard and I wanted to sort out my thoughts. I got a job as a deckhand on one of those pleasure cruise ships that go around the world.
Why did you go as a deckhand? You had money.
I wanted the experience. Whenever I've got waterlogged spiritually, whenever I've absorbed all I can for the time, it's useful, I've found, doing something of that sort.
Labor purifies the soul?
If that's how you want to put it. That winter, after Isabel and I broke off our engagement, I worked in a coal mine near Lens for 6 months.
What?
I met a Pole called Costi, a big, lumbering, surly giant. He was questing as I was doing.
Down the coal mine?
Yes. Costi introduced me to mystical literature. Plotinus, Master Eckhart, and so on. After that...
Yes.
We tramped through Belgium and Germany, and down the Rhine. We worked on a farm doing whatever we were asked to do.
How did that go?
It was exhausting. But I was taking part in the business of the world. I was doing as countless millions do. Hard physical work concentrates the thoughts wonderfully. You're right. And you sleep like the proverbial log. I tell you.
An alternative to sleeping powders, yes.
Costi was so strong, like an ox. It built me up a bit, see?
Well, very impressive.
Costi and I, we went our own ways, and I ended up in Bonn.
Bonn?
I met a remarkable man, Father Enzyme, a Benedictine monk, so kindly and broad-minded and tolerant. He questioned me about my reading. He asked me if I believed in God. I didn't know what answer to give.
What did your father,
Enzyme.
What did he have to say to that?
He said he wanted to hear what had happened to me in my life. Was I a man of thought or of action?
You've told me about your reading. You like to use your hands, so you're both.
Or maybe I'm neither. At school.
At school? Go on, please. I'm interested.
At school, I wasn't very good at any subject in particular. I fitted in all right, but I was nothing special. I was crazy about aviation, though. That was doing. My guardian, my parents were dead. He was as excited as me. They were the early days of flying, you know. He fixed it for me to fly. I was tall for my age, and when I was 16, I could pass for 18. He helped me get over to Canada, and he gave me a letter to someone he knew. And so by the time I was 17, I was flying in France.
Go on, please.
They were terrible gimcrack planes we flew then, and you practically took your life in your hands each time you went up. I just loved flying. In the air, way up, I felt that I was part of something very great and very beautiful. I didn't know what it was all about. I only knew that I wasn't alone anymore. Even by myself at 2,000 feet up, I can only put it like this. I felt that I belonged. Sounds silly.
No, not at all.
There was a boy in my squadron, a little chap with red hair, an Irishman. We called him Patsy. He was a live wire. Funny face, funny grin, so it made you laugh just to look at him. He'd do the craziest things. No fear in him at all. He'd escape death by a hair's breadth, and it was the best joke in the world to him. He didn't hate the Jerrys. He loved to scrap, and fighting them tickled him to death. He'd have given you his last penny, and he could always cheer you up. When we were in Paris on leave, he went wild.
Now you're playing Mr. Darrell.
Larry, Patsy, call me Larry.
Come on then, Larry. Keep up.
We were due for another spot of leave, and we made our plans for it. The day before we were to go, we were sent up to fly over the enemy lines and bring back reports of what we saw. Suddenly, we came up against some German planes, and before we knew it, we were in the middle of a dogfight. One of them came after me, but I got in first. I took a look to see if he was going to crash, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw another plane on my tail. I dived to get away from him, but he was on me like a flash, and I thought I was done for. Then I saw Patsy come down on him like a streak of lightning and give him all he's got. Patsy got down before me. He was lying on the ground, and they were waiting for the ambulance to come up.
I got that blighter who was on your tail.
What's the matter, Patsy?
It's nothing.
Suddenly, a strange look came over his face. It had just come to him that he was dying. Him. Before they could stop him, he sat up.
Well, I'm jiggered.
He fell back dead.
Patsy? Patsy, no.
He was 22.
No, Patsy, not you.
He was going to marry a girl in
Patsy.
Ireland after the war.
Patsy!
A minute before, he'd been full of life. So alive. And now, there was nothing.
Life hangs by such a fine thread.
It was the wickedness of it that broke me. The war came to an end and I went home. I'd been wounded and I had to take it easy for a while. Then they wanted me to go to work. I couldn't do the sort of work that they wanted me to do.
It wasn't your honest toil and labor.
Making more money for people with lots already? Investments, returns, securities?
Serving mammon?
It seemed futile. I'd had a lot of time to think, and I kept asking myself what life was for. After all, it was only by luck that I was alive. I wanted to make something of my life, but I didn't know what.
You told all this to your monk?
He asked me where 4 years of reading had got me. I told him. Nowhere.
What did he say to you?
That, let me get this right, that if you act as if you believe in God, belief will be granted to you. If you pray with doubt, but pray with sincerity, your doubt will be dispelled. He said, you are a deeply religious man who doesn't believe in God. God will seek you out. You'll come back whether here or elsewhere, only God can tell.
And off you went to the East?
To India, finally.
And did India give you the secret of the universe?
I can tell you that the universe has no beginning and no end. Everything is a cycle of growth. Equilibrium, decline, dissolution, then growth again. And so on, to all eternity.
And what is the point of this endless recurrence?
Well, the purpose of creation is to serve as a stage for the punishment or reward of the deeds of the soul's earlier existence.
Do you believe in reincarnation? I know they do, but what about you, Larry?
That's a very difficult question to answer.
That's why I asked you.
And you want an answer.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible for us Occidentals to believe in it as implicitly as the Orientals do. It's in their blood and bones. With us, it can only be an opinion. I neither believe in it nor disbelieve in it.
What's the goal of it all?
We call self soul. They call it Atman. Self is apart from the body and its senses, also separate from the mind and intelligence. It is uncreated. It has existed from eternity. And when at last it has cast off the 7 veils of ignorance, it will return to the infinitude from which it came, yes?
I'm following you.
Right. It's like a drop of water that's risen from the sea, and in a shower has fallen into a puddle. It then has to find its long way back to the sea.
But that poor little drop of water,
yes,
when it got back to the sea and become one, then surely it's lost its individuality.
What is individuality but the expression of our egoism? Until the soul has shed the last trace of that, it cannot become one with the Absolute.
The Absolute, you say?
Reality. Brahman. It's nowhere and everywhere.
But what is it?
Not a person, not a thing, not a cause. It has no qualities.
Oh.
It transcends permanence and change, whole and part, finite and infinite. It is eternal because its completeness and perfection are unrelated to time. It is truth and freedom.
Got it.
The Absolute is also there in the little figures of God set up by the roadside. All the umpteen gods of India are to help you come to the realization that self is one with the Supreme Self.
What led you to this austere faith?
I've always felt that there was something pathetic in the founders of religion who made it a condition of salvation that you should believe in them. It's as though they needed your faith in order to have faith in themselves.
Understood.
Advaita doesn't ask you to take anything on trust. It asks only that you should have a passionate craving to know reality. It states that you can experience God as surely as you can experience joy or pain. You attain reality by knowledge.
Right.
Love and good works came into their thinking later on, but the noblest way, though the hardest, is the way of knowledge. And its instrument is the most precious faculty that we have, our reason.
Not much further.
I'm fine.
Altitude affects everyone at first. Your breathing will become easier.
It will?
Now, you will see the view from here.
It's glorious. It's stupendous.
Wait till you see your first sunrise.
I'm lost for words.
You will be alone.
What, by myself?
Quite alone. No one for 20 miles.
That's a rare luxury in this world.
A simple hut with no more than the very little you'll need. A bed, a table, a chair.
That sounds perfect.
Allow some time to pass. Then you will start to feel the effects. Seclusion works wonders.
What will happen?
You will begin to feel released from your body.
I will?
You will be pure spirit. The knowledge you'll carry will be more than human.
What was that?
A cat.
A cat?
Don't be alarmed.
I'm not.
Everything that's been confused in your mind will become clear. Everything that has perplexed you, it will be explained.
The Swami was right. What I experienced on the mountain, the elation, it was as real as any feeling I've ever had.
Elation, you say?
I was ravished with the beauty of the world. I can't put it any other way. The nights, the dawns,
The Himalayas changed your life?
Yes. Why should we in the West, we Americans especially, why should we be daunted by decay and death, hunger and thirst, sickness, old age, grief, disillusion?
So? Why?
Nothing in the world is permanent, and we're foolish when we ask anything to last. But surely we're still more foolish not to take delight in it when we have it. Why not make change the premise of all our thinking? The spirit of life was so strong in me then, on my mountain. I have never felt more alive, I tell you.
Really?
If what they said was true, when I had worked out the karma of my present life, then I wouldn't be returning anymore. That thought, it filled me with dismay. I wanted to live again and again. I was willing to accept every sort of life, no matter the pain and sorrow of it. I felt that only life after life could satisfy me, satisfy my eagerness, my vigor, this curiosity of mine.
You'll go back to America?
Yes.
And you'll tell them what you've told me, will you?
Americans are idealists too. I happen to think we set our ideal on the wrong objects. The greatest ideal man can set before himself is self-perfection.
How can one man have any effect? The Americans are restless, busy, lawless, individualistic.
It was one man who invented the wheel, who discovered the law of gravitation. If you throw a stone in a pond, the universe isn't quite the same as it was before. Those holy men of India don't lead useless lives. They are a shining light in the darkness.
You'll need financial independence in America.
No, I shall try to get work in a garage.
Waste your energy?
It'll free my mind for thought.
Money buys you time. What if you're interested in walking instead of getting a bus or going by taxi?
True enough, I hadn't thought of that. I could save up the money I don't spend and buy my own taxi.
Oh, Larry, it's true, you're as crazy as a loon.
Not at all. I'm very sensible and practical.
You'd really get a taxi?
Certainly I would. I'd try.
That would make you a capitalist.
My taxi would be my badge, the instrument of my labor, my staff and begging bowl.
Well, money has given me independence anyway. What a comfort it's been to think I could tell someone to go to hell.
But I don't want to tell anyone in the world to go to hell. You see, money to you means freedom. To me, it means bondage.
Well, here's the waiter. If you're going to chuck your money down the drain, you can damn well pay the bill. We left. It had been a long, long night. How good it felt to be out of doors again in the fresh, clean autumn air. Can I give you a lift?
No, I'll walk down to the Seine, have a swim at one of the baths. Then I must go to the bibliothèque. I got some research to do there.
And that was the last I saw of Larry for the next 6 months. An unhappy circumstance brought us back together.
This is Chief Inspector Dupont.
Yes?
Toulon Police.
Toulon?
Monsieur, does the name Sophie MacDonald say something to you?
I know a person of that name.
I would request that you present yourself here without delay, Monsieur Maugham.
For what reason? I'm only slightly acquainted with Mrs. MacDonald.
That is not my affair. You have had dealings with this woman, yes?
What is this?
She was reported missing from her lodging since 5 days.
Yes?
Now a body has been recovered from the harbor. We have reason to believe it might be her. Monsieur?
But surely she can be identified by her clothes and her papers.
She was found naked with her throat cut.
Good heavens. Very well. I'll take the first train I can. At Toulon Police Headquarters, I was told she was a drunkard, a dope fiend, and a nymphomaniac. I couldn't appear surprised.
She has a habit of sleeping with sailors from the ships and the riffraff from the town.
I see, Inspector.
Chief Inspector, monsieur. I must ask you, a gentleman of your own age, a respectable person, how has he become acquainted with such a character?
I remembered. The book I'd given her and signed. They'd found it in her room, along with some detective stories and a few books of poetry. Baudelaire and Rimbaud and Pound.
We have found a photograph. One photograph. Somewhere I have it. A young man in bathing trunks. Ah, here it is. Do you know who this person is?
It was Larry. If I didn't tell them and they discovered his identity, it would look as if I had something to hide. Larry came down and was questioned with the tough Sophie knew in the town. He explained that he hadn't seen her for 18 months, and also why Sophie should have his snapshot, and he was able to account satisfactorily for his movements during the past week. The two of us went for lunch. I ordered a vintage wine, speciality of the house. Here.
Oh, I really don't
You
think...
damn well drink it. May suggest a topic of conversation to you.
Shri Ganesha used to say that silence also is conversation.
That suggests a jolly social gathering of intellectual dons at Cambridge University.
I'm afraid you'll have to stand the racket of this funeral by yourself. I haven't any money.
I'm quite prepared to do that. Oh, you haven't been and gone and done it, really. You haven't got rid of your money.
Every last cent except what I need to last me till my ship comes in.
Oh, what ship?
I've got a place on a Marseille freighter. It goes from the Near East to New York.
You're working a passage, you mean?
It's a freighter, not a liner. Yes. When I step on board, I shall have nothing but the clothes I stand up in and a few things in my grip. And my labor.
Well, it's your choice. And your money.
If you feel like telling me I'm a damn fool, I don't mind.
No, I don't particularly feel like that. I was only wondering if your life wouldn't have fallen into a more perfect pattern.
Yes?
If you'd married and had children like everyone else.
It's too late for that now. The only woman I've ever met and could have married was poor Sophie.
Can you say that after all that has happened?
She had a lovely soul. She was aspiring and generous. Her ideals were great-hearted. The end was tragic, but it was noble.
What?
How she sought her own destruction like that.
A few days later, I started for England. My intention had been to go straight through, but after what had happened, I particularly wanted to see Isabel, before she and Gray returned to the United States. So I decided to stop in Paris for 24 hours.
It's a pity poor Uncle Elliot wasn't more advanced. Picasso, Matisse, you know? I suppose his pictures are good in their way, but I'm afraid they'll seem rather old-fashioned.
Oh, don't bother about that. Other painters will come along in a few years. Picasso and Matisse won't seem any more up-to-date than your Impressionists. What about the furniture?
Not very suitable. I want a house that looks modern inside, with perhaps just a little touch of Mexican here and there to give it a note. As soon as I get to New York, I'll find out who the decorator is everyone's going to now.
I can't help you there.
Any come and go with Larry?
Yes. We were at Toulon together only the other day.
Were you? What were you doing there?
Burying Sophie.
She's not dead.
If she hadn't been, we'd have had no plausible reason to bury her.
That's not funny. I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry. Drink and dope, I suppose.
She had her throat cut and was chucked into the harbour.
How horrible. Poor thing. Of course, leading the life she did, she was bound to come to a bad end.
The Toulon police said the very same.
Do they know who did it?
No, but I do. I think you killed her.
What are you talking about?
I ran across her at Toulon last summer. I had a long talk with her.
Was she sober?
Sufficiently. I got the whole story about why she dropped Larry and disappeared.
Sophie's story.
Yes. Of course you feature in it. Indirectly. It seemed to me, not to Sophie necessarily, that you were implicated. Yes, I'd say you were mixed up in it, Isabel. To that pretty neck of yours.
There's no reason why I shouldn't be perfectly frank with you.
Good.
It was most unfortunate that I had to go out that day she came round. I needed to find a dentist for poor Joan. And of course Antoine should never have left the liquor and coffee things in the room. They ought to have been taken away when I went out.
Are you sure the bottle wasn't left there on your explicit instructions?
Quite.
I don't believe you.
Don't then. All right, if you want the truth, you can have it, and to hell with you. I did it, and I'd do it again. I told you I'd stick at nothing to prevent her from marrying Larry. You wouldn't do a thing, either you or Gray. You just shrugged your shoulders and said it was a terrible mistake. You didn't care a damn. I did.
If you'd left her alone, she'd be alive now.
Married to Larry, and he'd be utterly miserable. He thought he'd make a new woman of her. What fools men are. I knew that sooner or later she'd break down. It stuck out a mile.
You see, I was right. You cut her throat as surely as if you'd drawn the knife across it with your own hands.
She was bad, 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 and I'm glad she's dead. Oh, give me a cocktail, damn you.
Very well.
Oh, you are a mean devil. You won't tell Larry, will you?
I wouldn't dream of it. But I don't suppose I shall ever see him again in my life.
What do you mean?
At this moment, our friend is on a freighter, either as a deckhand or a stoker, on his way to New York. Here.
Oh, thank you. What a strange creature he is. But I'm glad. That means we shall see him.
I doubt it. His America will be as remote from your America as the Gobi Desert. Then I told Isabel what Larry had done with his money and what he intended to do. Working as a mechanic, putting in a long shift, getting his hands dirty. After that, driving a truck across the United States to see the lie of the land. And then, maybe, saving up to buy his own taxi.
He's crazy. He's crazy. Now I really have lost him.
Your beloved husband is at the front door.
If I don't stop crying, my eyes will be terrible. And we're going out tonight. Yes, half an hour with an ice bag over my eyes. That's what I want. Do you think any the worse of me for what I did?
Would you care?
Strange as it may seem to you, I would. I want you to think well of me.
You're not a bad woman in your way, and you have every grace and charm. You only lack one thing to make you completely enchanting.
What's that?
Tenderness. I said goodbye to them both. Gray was itching to get back to work and talking up his business future in Texas. Isabel slipped her arm through Gray's. She nestled up to him. She looked into his eyes with an expression that imitated very well the tenderness I had accused her of lacking.
Tell me, Gray, frankly, do you think I'm hard-boiled?
No, darling, far from it. Why, has anybody been saying you were?
No.
Isabel turned her head away so that Gray shouldn't see. In a manner that Elliot would have thought very unladylike, she put out her tongue at me. But I leave Isabel in not Paris, but Dallas. I've never been.
Shall I ever manage to persuade you to visit us? You have readers here, too, you know. We have fine houses for you to mosey around, and country clubs where you can eavesdrop. The Maturin residence has been furnished from cellar to attic in the latest mode. We can show New York a thing or two. I give my ladies lunches. My lovely Joan and Priscilla will soon be at an age to marry. Gray's a little redder in the face, I must admit. Don't ever tell him I told you. He has a lot less hair, and he's a good deal heavier.
But Isabel, in my mind's eye, she doesn't change. She is still more beautiful than her daughters. Isabel is entertaining, gracious, complacent, and tactful. Married, of course, to the quintessential regular guy. This is the end of my story. I have heard nothing of Larry, nor did I expect to. Since he generally did what he said he would, I think it likely that on his return to America he did get a job in a garage. He was giving himself to manual labor, as those other countless millions do, every day. All the while, his mind was focused on higher things. And then, yes, he drove a truck, long days and nights, till he had acquired the knowledge he wanted of the country he'd been away from for so long. And that other fantastic suggestion, thrown across a Paris cafe table half in jest, that he might become a taxi driver. I have never since taken a cab in New York without glancing at the mirror on the chance that I might meet Larry's gravely smiling, deep-set eyes. But no, I never have. We've had another war. Nothing changes, and Larry is satisfied to lead his chosen life and to be no more than just himself. He will have accomplished something fine if he can share with just a few that glowing belief of his.
Ultimate satisfaction, my friend. It can only be found in the life of the spirit.
Larry has been absorbed, as he wished, into the tumultuous conglomeration of humanity. Here in New York is just the right place for him. I'm trying to think of an ending, how to make my exit. As I've been remembering, it dawned on me that what I've been describing to you is nothing more or less than a success story, because the persons I've been telling you about each got what they wanted. For Elliot, it was social eminence. For Isabel, it was an assured position and the financial wherewithal so she could triumph in an active and cultured community like Dallas.
Come and see us. Promise me you will.
Gray landed a steady and lucrative job with an office to go to from 9 till 6 every day. Sophie, poor Sophie. She got what she'd been looking for all along. Death and a kind of redemption. And Larry, I do believe Larry has found a goal too.
You sacrifice yourself to false gods, my friend. Ambition, money, possessions. Happiness is knowing who you are, and then giving yourself back to the great continuum of time. Sometimes this earth of ours is ugly, and sometimes its beauty makes you want to sing and dance down the street.
Damn the critics. In our heart of hearts, we all like a true success story.
Taxi! Taxi!
The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham was dramatized by Ronald Frame. Somerset Maugham was played by Nicholas Leprevo, Larry by John Light, Isabel by Megan Dodds, and Elliot by Edward Petherbridge. Gray was played by Sam Dale, the Swami by Amajit Dew, Patsy by Paul Dinnan, Joseph by Philip Fox, Sophie by Laurel Lefko, and Miss Keith by Carolyn Pickles. The Razor's Edge was directed by Gaynor McFarlane.